Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier and this is the Piracy Show. Now, we are going to be starting off with footage from last week. And the reason why we're doing that is because I saw the comment. It's like, oh, you cut the video short before you tried to deliver the package because that mission doesn't work. It didn't work for me. And so I'm showing the rest of the footage here so you can see that I did complete the mission. The mission did work for me. It was a fun experience. Now, I also did Invasion Orison. We did complete it. We did get our reward. And I can say honestly that it was a terrible experience. In fact, it was probably one of the most awful experiences that I've had playing Star Citizen. The game played out more like a PowerPoint presentation than it normally did. It was populated with a bunch of NPCs that wink into existence at the drop of a hat and then gun you down with unerring accuracy. Wonderful. But once again, these things reflect, this mission works for me, doesn't work for this other guy. This mission is great for this player and it makes a great YouTube video, and then I'm playing it and I'm like, what is this? This is a mess. And the reason why that is because the servers are so all over the page. You don't know how old the server you're getting onto is. You don't know how well it's running. And as that server runs and runs, certain things that players do on the server, not maliciously, but just certain things that they do as they're playing may trigger errors in the game. And that unfortunately compounds on the server over time. And if it doesn't crash the server right away, it just causes the server to become less performative. And so here we go. And mission complete. Amazing. Sorry. But yeah, so when we all look at Star Citizen, what we have to kind of keep in mind is that the experience that I have is not the experience that you have. The experience that you have is not the experience that I have. And so two players can look at a mission and see two wildly different things. But that can solely be just because the server was playing like shit, right? And that's not either of the player's fault. So you could say, someone could be like, oh man, this is the greatest. And then another person would be like, oh, it was terrible. It was awful. And you're like, oh no, you're just a Star Citizen hater. It's like, no, you're just a Star Citizen shill. Why don't you go marry Chris Roberts? Blah. And it's just like, no. This guy got onto a server that was fresh. It ran well. This guy got onto a server that was on its last legs, and someone should have just walked along and just put a bullet in its head and just put it out of its misery. But no, they all did the mission anyway. And guess what? Surprise, surprise, it sucked. And that really is kind of one of the big problems, is that there's a lot of stuff going on in the back end on Star Citizen that just is not great. Is really not great, and so it can give false impressions both in the negative and in the positive, right? So you have to kind of keep these things in mind before you get into like, it's time to be a Spectrum warrior. It's like, oh wait, let me get my fedora and get on Reddit. I gotta let these Star Citizen haters have it. You may be just someone who lucks out, right? You might be the guy who runs like 50 cargo runs and never runs into an error, and then the guy 3 apartments down from you, IRL or whatnot, gets 30K to every 2 seconds and loses all his money. It happens, right? You have to allow for that's a possibility when you're talking about the game or when you're arguing about the game. You both can be playing the same thing and still be having wildly different experiences, because we're not all in a single shared world where this single piece of hardware or whatnot is supporting all of us together. And so one person could be in a shitty zone, one person could be in a good zone, right? But the way players experience things differently is also something that I kind of wanted to talk about today. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but we talked about this game quite a while ago, in fact, which was Last Oasis. Now, you might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with anything? Last Oasis was a game where you built walkers and you kind of walked around in this post-apocalyptic desert world on these giant wooden walkers, and you were always in the search for water and whatnot. But it was open world PvP. And this is where we kind of come to what I want to talk about in Star Citizen. Recently, the developers of Last Oasis, Donkey Crew, kind of folded and said, okay, well, we're creating PvE servers now. I guess at that point they had said, you know what, we've got 300 concurrent players on Steam right now, which was actually a number that they had. Maybe it's time to rethink how we're implementing this. Now, the game was wildly popular when it first came out, but the problem was, of course, players joined into these super large groups called Zergs, and they would just annihilate anyone who was not in their particular tribe or group. And it very quickly degenerated into just basically a Zerg fest. And so solo players, which I know it's crazy, but in the MMO world, a lot of players are solo players. They like playing it as an RPG, but an RPG that occasionally allows them to play together with their friends, you know? And so a game that really was this post-apocalyptic, well-designed, I mean, in theory, a game that could write its own ticket, so to speak, quickly degenerated into just a nightmare for most of its players. It's one of the situations where you can look at what happened, and you can as much blame the developers as you can blame the community, right? But we have to remember that this is a game where players were forced into very minimal amount of nodes, and you could make the same argument that having to travel to Star Citizen or having to travel to a planet is the same sort of idea. But the problem is that these nodes were extremely small. They were in fact quite tiny. And that kind of created this issue where players were just constantly forced into conflict with one another. And if you tried to play solo, and I actually found a little enjoyment doing that for a while, but the truth of it is that ultimately you were just constantly running for your life, and you had little time for, progression. I got about halfway up the progression tree, and then I just realized that if I wanted to stay alive with my ship, I just had to be constant eagle eye, and after a while it just got too stressful, and I gave it the good college try to play it solo midway through the seasons to see if I could get away with it. But by then the community had also begun to die. But Star Citizen kind of works in a different way. The worlds in Star Citizen, the areas that you play in, are vastly larger. Players coming into conflict with one another is not as likely unless you hang around certain nodes, right? And this is, I think, what people don't really understand is if you want to go out and you want to hunt players in Star Citizen, you really got to look. And I think that in the future, with the right tweaks, with the right, focus from the development team, especially in areas regarding stealth or decoys and things like that, I think we can definitely create a fair way of exposing players to risk, but also giving them the tools to evade the risk. Because I've always been a fan of the idea of evasion in a game. Like, there's a lot of ways to escape. So if you want to really nail someone down and get them, you've really got to be on top of their game. But if somebody really wants to slip away and escape, like you see me do this in videos where I kind of find the circuitous route to complete a mission simply to avoid crime stat or something like that. I love that sort of thing, and I think that should exist in multiple ways and in multiple layers throughout the game. ways for players to evade pirates and ways for pirates to try and detect, these higher skill level checks where players try to detect one another or verify if it's actually the player or a decoy or something like that. I think as we kind of go into that, we know that decoy missiles are going to be a thing in Star Citizen, at least conceptually. They've told us about this. But I think that realistically, while there is a valid argument within the context of a game, certainly like Last Oasis, to make an argument for they should have removed World PvP a long ago, or at least made it an option that players can click off or click on. They waited a lot too long to... They waited way too long to... A lot too long. They waited way too long to implement those changes, to the point where, they had, like, at sometimes 300 concurrent players on Steam. But I think that Star Citizen, we still haven't crossed that bridge yet where we can kind of sit here and say, okay, maybe we need to look at this a little bit more. Like, Last Oasis had kind of passed that milestone and then gone way beyond it before they could make a decision, whereas Star Citizen really hasn't hit that milestone yet. There's a lot of mechanics and there's a lot of functions in the game that just aren't there yet. So it's possible, but I think we're way too early to really make a judgment call as to whether or not we need to make adjustments in PvP. Remember, once again, that we are all trapped within the same star system. That is going to change in the not too distant future, but for right now, what you're seeing is artificially inflated, experiences, I would say. And really, this is just not indicative at all of what Star Citizen will be in its, hopefully, final form.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.